right, I'm going to hit record. We are live on Facebook, and we are now recording. Go ahead, Lawrence.
All right. So, good morning, everybody. September 17. Welcome. Thanks for being on the call. Appreciate your time on this. We're going to be doing a series this time, and it's like maybe 10 or 11, depending on how we go. And we're going to be talking about the mindset traits of successful entrepreneurs. And we've come up with some stuff which I think would be pretty interesting for you. But before we do that, we have to, of course, go to the little mantra that is part of all this, which is we've got to get this embedded in our minds. The slaughterhouse of failure is not in our destiny. We will persevere until we succeed. That's from Og Mandino. So anyway, the mindset of successful entrepreneurs. So I think we need to know if we have an entrepreneurial mindset or not, because we've got to know that if we do, how are we going to adapt to the situations we have? What's different from 20 years ago? The entrepreneur of 20 years ago is a different animal to the entrepreneur of today. Because we're in real-time mode now. In the old days, you could think about stuff. You could write a letter. You could send a fax or something like that. Nowadays, it's a completely different ballgame. And in my opinion, adaptability is key. We have to be able to think and analyze and decide almost instantly. It's a real-time business. It's a business where we've got to adapt to learn many things, like the new systems, new apps, new technology. All of these things are making us go at breakneck speed. Dan?
Yeah, and a lot of things have changed in the last 20 years with the advent of cell phones and the internet becoming more prominent, apps, text messaging, all of these things that have changed in the last 20 years have really caused us to change how we do business, right? And we have to be able to adapt and pivot to these things that are changing in our lives. And one of those, if you have more than one of these traits that we're going to talk about, you're probably in a good spot from an entrepreneur standpoint. And so, you need to have that entrepreneurial mindset to succeed in this day and age because of all the changes that are going on. You have to have that adaptability, the ability to pivot to new things going on. One of the things that we've learned in the last year and a half is that, during the pandemic, is that there's no certainty on the time that we're going to be employed, and the good thing about this business is we are our own employers. We're our own boss. But with that comes the responsibility of being able to adapt and pivot and lead our teams in a way that makes them feel good about what we're doing and where we're leading them. And in turn, we have to look to them also for their input on how we can move forward as well. It's not just a one-man band. We're all in this business as a team, and we all have teams. We're all leaders of our teams, and we need to do that effectively. But along with leading those teams comes the responsibility of also knowing what our weaknesses are and being able to adapt to our weaknesses and use the positives of our other team members to be able to succeed. And a lot of that comes from having a positive attitude. The way that you act around challenges and obstacles, it reflects on the way that you do business. And that also affects how employees will see you. And as leaders, we want employees or team members to see us as what we are, which is leaders, right? Because we're leading them down a path, hopefully to success. Basically on our backs doing exactly what we've done to be successful and teaching them those processes to become successful themselves.
Yeah, you know, the positive attitude that we have, whether it's with our families. I mean, you know, as a head of a household, we also have responsibility that we've chosen to have by having families, and it's up to us to be able to have that positive attitude, to be able to maintain a level way of thinking, and not succumb to the trials and tribulations of what's going on, but rather we should be part of a solution and not part of the problem that everybody else seems to be facing. So there's one thing that I think is important, is that when we think about preventive medicine, we're also, in my opinion, considering mental health, which is hugely important. And this is also part of preventive medicine, where we're looking at mental health. And stress is one of the biggest problems that we have in our daily lives. And being leaders, being entrepreneurs, we've got to stay above that. We've got to be able to balance the mind and the mental health, the mind and what's going on between family stresses, what's going on. And we've also got to keep bread on the table. So we've got to always maintain the vision. We've got to maintain our goal. We've got to maintain the sight of where we're going. And we're hit with all kinds of curveballs, which we've talked about many times. And these are things which reflect on our mental attitudes and our mental health, how we do that, and how we feel. You know, how we feel is something that other people pick up on. You can feel well or you can feel badly. Some people sometimes will say, "Hey, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." And maybe you think you are, but maybe you're not reflecting that. So it's about really walking the talk and being fine, being ourselves, being secure, being sure of what we're doing. We've chosen path. We've chosen the path of being an entrepreneur. We've chosen the path of leading a team. We've chosen the path of having a family. We've chosen the part of whatever it is that we've chosen. These are our choices in life. And if we've chosen them, then we've got to understand the rules of the game, and we've got to maintain that focus on the positivity, focus on being able to live happily with ourselves, so that we're not, you know, beating ourselves up a lot. I mean, I have, I believe, very high standards, and I keep on, you know, looking in the mirror and saying, you can do better. But I don't dwell on a failure. I just say, okay, this is a challenge, and let's get moving, and let's keep it going forward. So I think the mental health is a part of our preventive medicine, and it's all part of the positivity that we need to impart in our teams, in our families, in our lives, who we are. That's how we will be judged, is exactly how we portray ourselves.
Yeah, positivity can be can be contagious, but it can also be detrimental, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that positive mindset and that positive attitude, that's going to come across to your team members and your potential customers as well. You know, along with what Lawrence is saying about mental health, you know, we had a call with a team member yesterday who's just joining our team, and you know, he's ready to go out and sell, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know, right? He's not really familiar with what we're doing. And so, you know, we had about an hour-long call with him yesterday about, you know, you need to know exactly what we're doing. You know, you need to come out to the forum at the end of September, because it's going to cut, you know, time off of your learning curve, and it's going to get you up to speed quicker to be able to help your upline, but also your team members as you start to bring people onto the team. And so, part of that mental toughness, mental positive attitude is comes from a place of knowing exactly what we're talking about, right? Not only as entrepreneurs, but in this business and about the scanner and the products that we have, and how to talk to physicians and medical device sales reps about what we have, right? And you need to talk about it positively, and you need to be resolute in what you're portraying to people, because that comes across whether you know what you're talking about or you don't, and so one of the toughest things when I was in medical device sales was, the physicians were always smarter in that particular, they knew more about that particular space, in my case in particular, orthopedics, than what I would probably ever know, because they've spent a lot more time studying it. But in this case, we've spent a lot more time, our goal should be to spend a lot more time studying nutrition and knowing more about nutrition and the biophotonic scanner, so we can portray that to our potential team members. And so it's all about keeping that positive attitude and translating that to not only what we're saying to people, but also how we're saying it.
Lead by example. Do as I do, and it's up to us to do the right thing, and it's up to us to be able to have the courage to understand our shortfalls and our shortcomings, and also our strengths, and be able to dance in the rain even when it's pouring. So we've got to lead by example, is what I think you're saying, Dan, and I think I agree with you, because it's a question of, but there again, it's a question of knowing who we are. Do we know ourselves well enough to be able to steer the boat during the gale? Can we change our sails in time? The wind is coming and we've got a big problem. We've got a storm coming and we're in a sailing boat. We've got to be able to adapt the sails. We've got to be able to know where and how to move those sails of our lives. How are we going to navigate the pitfalls that are happening and the problems that we've got right now? We've got a country which is very, very divided, a lot of people. And we've got to be able to navigate the mental anguish that people have. And we've got to be above that. We've got to know who we are and what we are and how we can conduct our lives in a way where we're leading in a positive way. So I'm trying to say.
Yeah, if you look at some of the leaders of the day or the last 20 years, Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and a number of others, they have that ability to inspire people. And I was talking to Lawrence yesterday about SpaceX. There was a documentary that I saw on Netflix called Countdown: Inspiration for Mission to Space. And so that's, Elon Musk and SpaceX, they're launching 4 civilians into space. I think the launch was a day or two ago, but they're going to spend, I think, 3.5 days in space, and they're basically the first civilians to do that. And so, that's inspirational. But what they wanted to do on this launch was they wanted to have 4 different people from 4 different walks of life. So they wanted to have one person that was a leader, which was a gentleman named Jared. I can't remember his last name, but they wanted somebody that represented hope, and that was a childhood juvenile cancer survivor who now works with children at St. Jude's. And then they had inspiration, and I forget what the 4th one was, but what was really interesting to me about that is they could have just thrown anybody on that, had people pay to take that ship into space, but what they wanted to be inspirational, and that's where the name Inspiration 4 came from. They got 4 people on there that are meant to inspire people moving forward, and it's a monumental task that SpaceX has done, and that doesn't happen without leadership and the obstacles that they faced, and remaining positive in the face of those obstacles. One of the things that I firmly believe in is that you need to be open to anything when you're an entrepreneur. Uh, you need to be able to take everything and roll with the punches. You need to be able to adapt to the changing environment of the business. And I think we've done that really, really well over the last 18 months with the pandemic going on. You know, I haven't talked to anybody in this business who hasn't remained positive. And I think that's just uh, the fact that, you know, this business draws people that are entrepreneurs and who are positive people in general. And so everybody's seemed to stay really positive during this time. And, you know, the people that are going to come out of this pandemic in our business, the best are those people that are able to be open to change and pivoting in the face of adversity.
So I think the leadership of Elon Musk, for example, in choosing for this particular mission, which is a completely new, uncharted territory to send people up in space and civilians and so on. But we also have to identify the talents that we've got in our own teams and be able to help those people develop those talents. So, for example, you know, my own shortcoming because of, well, I guess it's not an excuse, it's just a reason. You know, I still use a pen and paper for a pencil and never mind a pen, a pencil and paper. I mean, that's how I was brought up. So, you know, I've got to also work with developing not only my own, let's call it skills, but which I'm trying to find, but my own skills, but also with the people that are much more talented than I am. And that is also one of the skills of an entrepreneur, is to surround oneself with people more able and skilled and capable than oneself. So, for example, in our team, we've got, you know, people that are like Dan and like Mike and John and so on. We've got a lot of different talents. Every one of you has got talents that somebody else may not have. And these are all part of the team that the entrepreneur has to identify. And he's like an orchestra conductor. He's got to be able to coordinate all of these talents and team talents into an orchestrated melody of success. And, you know, it's a concert. It's a concert of getting all these raw talents and synchronizing them into a successful result. And that starts with ourselves. It starts with knowing who we are. It's knowing that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to our team members, and to be able to identify all these people and bring out the best in each one, which inevitably brings out the best in ourselves. By being able to help and identify the best in other people and working with that, it brings up the best in ourselves. And I think that's part of being an entrepreneur. And it's also, for me, the panacea for mental health in this case, where the anguishes that we have are overcome by the successes that we are able to help other people achieve. So for me, when I have a moment of wobbly, you know, uncertainty, and then I reflect and I say, well, wait a minute, look, so and so is doing really well, he's doing well, and it's my little 1% half grain of sand that may have influenced that, may be influencing that, and that's what overcomes my own mental anguish.
If for me, overcoming some of my mental anguish comes from, as Lauren said, the variety of people that we have on this team and the willingness of everybody to work together. And so, you know, one of the things for me, particularly this week, that I was frustrated with was I was trying to get a scanner replaced for a customer, and I spent an exorbitant amount of time on hold. I don't even want to say how long I was on hold, but the great part of having a team is I was able to reach out to Lawrence, and Lawrence made some phone calls, made some contacts, and he was able, within 10 minutes of Lawrence doing that, I got a call from corporate to solve the issue. And so that's part of adapting to the environment. Is there's some drawbacks to what's going on right now at New Skin from a customer service standpoint, but being able to work through that and work around, think outside the box, and figure out how to get something done, even though it may not be easy the way that we're supposed to get it done. And so, for me, a huge part of that is, helping me remain positive about what we're doing, even though there's some frustration going on. And I'm sure everybody on this call has dealt with some of that frustration in the last couple of weeks. But it's remaining positive in that, using your team members, talking to your team members about how you can resolve an issue, and letting them help you resolve that issue. I think I've talked about it more than once. When I first got into this business, I thought I could do it all by myself, because that's what I was used to in medical device sales. I was a lone wolf, and I was out hunting every day. But in this business, a huge part of it is making sure that you get out to the healthcare forum, three-way calls to get that validation. It's hugely important. When I was first taught about three-way calls, I thought it was ridiculous. I was like, I can just do this all by myself. I don't know why we need to make three-way calls. And for the most part, I still do it mostly myself. I have those initial calls, but there's always some point when I think the time is right to bring in that third-party validation. It may not be in the first call or the second call, but it can happen in the third or fourth call. But you always want to maintain that system that we have in place, where we're able to call on those who may know more than us, or may bring some more value than what we might bring to the table, to use them for those validation calls.
So the ego which we've got to leave out the door. We've got to leave that at the door and say, and that's something that as an entrepreneur, we've got to have the ego to drive us, but we've got to have the humility to be able to incorporate other people into what we're doing and how we're doing it. So, I just want to mention that the leadership that Dan has shown during the most adverse event in his life, and an advent which would certainly make us all stumble, did not once appear to have affected Dan's resilience and his positive attitude and his leadership. So, he went through the most terrible time of his life, mental anguish more than everything, because of the diagnosis that he'd had and the physical effects of chemotherapy and so on. And it's been several months. It's not just a week, it's months and months and months and months. and I think this is where the attitude rubs off, when you see somebody who is absolutely not succumbing to the pressures of a very, very terrible situation. And I think this is where true leadership comes in, and this is where we actually should emulate and understand that if we are leaders, if we are entrepreneurs, we've got to walk the talk. We've got to be the leader, not just say or do things. I mean, we've actually got to walk the talk. That's all there is to it. And that is where we are inspired, we get inspired by leadership, and Dan is one of those. So Dan, kudos to you, man, and thanks for being the leader that you are.
Thanks, Lawrence. And I've learned a lot from you over the years, and it's been fantastic working with you. But I want to make a comment on you talking about ego. And we all have egos of some sort, and at certain times in our lives, we need to put those to the side and show some of our weaknesses. One of the most difficult things for me in this business is I'm working with really, really high level medical device sales reps that have been salespeople for 25, 30, 35 years. And with that comes a lot of ego. You know, every single one of them just about says, oh, I could sell, you know, ketchup popsicles to a woman in white gloves. You know, I can sell anything. I can sell ice to an Eskimo, you know, but that's not what this is all about. What this is all about is putting your ego to the side and working with your team, you know, and from their perspective, they know everything they need to know about sales, and our team calls aren't worth it for them. And, you know, these Monday, Wednesday, Friday calls, they don't need that. And, you know, because they've never been exposed to it. And I was kind of similar to that when I first got into this. I was like, you know, why am I going to waste my time getting on these Monday, Wednesday, Friday calls? But they're very useful. They're very motivational. They're inspirational. And so, you know, I guess my point is that if you're out trying to recruit medical device sales reps, pharmacy reps, pharmaceutical reps, that, you know, if they've been in the game for a long time, they're all going to have some kind of ego that you're going to have to try and work through and break through to get them to get on these calls, to come out to the healthcare forum, to learn how our business works, because you know, this business works different than any other business, and the compensation plan is different, and, you know, the way that you get paid is different. And so it's, you know, there's a lot of education that needs to go on with these folks. But most importantly, you have to try and break through that ego to get them to be successful. The people that I've brought on personally that have been, you know, high level medical device sales reps that didn't stick to the business were those that we weren't able to break through that ego, where they didn't want to learn from us. They didn't want to listen to us. They didn't want to come to the forum. They didn't want to, I know everything I need to know, you know, and they don't know what they don't know.
And to your point, Dan, you know, we're witnessing right now some people that thought they knew everything and bumped their heads and their noses into adversity, which we all do, and who, after months of doing it my way, I mean their way, have understood that, oh, maybe I could listen, and actually coming into the forum this month after refusing to even consider getting on calls and going to you know, getting on the webinars and going to the forum. There's several of them now that are actually going to do that, and they've been reticent to be part of a team, as it were, because this is what it's about. Once you're a lone wolf, like you were for years, it's very difficult and it's humiliating to be part of a team, because you've been the king, you know, the king of your own castle. Now you're sharing the castle with a whole bunch of other people, and you've got to become king again, but by having a whole bunch of other people around you. So from the ego point of view, the biggest strength that anybody can have is to be humble, in my opinion, because to be humble takes a hell of a lot of strength. And I can say that as a Leo. I can say that as somebody that has always been, you know, running my own companies and so on. And the ego is something that we really need to understand and dominate.
And trust me, Lawrence has a huge ego. So for him to get over that, if he can get over that, anybody can get over that.
Okay, so it's 9 o'clock. I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment or something. Dan, if you've got anything else you want to add.
No, I got my smart ass comment and I think I'm good.
Anybody else got anything to say? Anybody that want to add anything? If not.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for this one, because Dan and you both helped really me with an aha moment here. And that is, you know, when you're out talking to these med device reps, you know, it's incumbent upon us to recognize this whole lone wolf paradigm, that we need to effectively recognize and then help them recognize and differentiate between what we do, so that they'll then recognize the importance of Provo and three-way calls as a couple of primary tools for them to be successful. Because if you're having a good conversation with one of them, they want to be successful. They want to create recurring incomes, but they may not really understand, or they won't many times understand the nuance necessary to make that transition. So I really thank you for that, because it helps me just place even greater emphasis on, let's get you to Provo. Let's get you to Provo.
Yeah, and John Whitaker used to say this all the time. I don't sell the business, I sell the forum. And
Yeah.
so, there's another paradigm that's going on in medical device that I think lends some hesitancy to a lot of these medical device reps. And that's, 15 years ago, the lone wolf paradigm was acceptable. But what these companies decided was, hey, we don't want to just have one guy in control of X, $3 million worth of business. So they've really been pushing over the last 5 to 10 years this team concept. And so what that does to somebody who's a hunter is they end up putting them on a team or teaming up with people that aren't hunters, that aren't bringing business to the table, and they're getting a piece of their pie because they're on a team. And so, I think there's always that hesitancy from them getting into this business and being a team on a team. Even though you're on a team, they're not giving up any of their compensation, right? And they're not giving up any of the control. And so from a pharmaceutical medical device company standpoint, what that team mentality that they were trying to cultivate did was it gave the company more control, right? Because now they didn't have one person in control of $3 or $5 million worth of business. There's 3 or 4 people on that team, and they could fire that guy who brought in all the business, but there's 3 team members that were able to step in and take over that business. Whereas prior to that, there wasn't. So, I think, that's detrimental to us, that mentality, because it's created that mentality in these medical device reps that they don't necessarily, that being part of a team is a bad thing, right? Does that make sense?
That's another big nuance, between med device salesperson and really an effective Pharmanex independent distributor.
Right. And one of the biggest things that I push to people is, whatever you do is yours. Whatever you kill, you eat, you kill, you eat, right? In this business. Yeah. It's not necessarily like that in medical device anymore. I just talked to a rep that I know. I've known him for 15 years, and he's like, I'm on this team and I'm doing 90% of the work, and I got these other people that are just basically case coverage people. They're babysitters, and I have to share my piece of the pie with them because it's forced on them. They have no choice.
Yeah. So. Well, isn't that another distinguishing factor when you're qualifying people, that you really want someone that's a hunter and not a placeholder?
Exactly. And you can tell pretty quickly who those people are. They from my perspective, those people that I don't know that say, oh, I want to run this past a couple of people, those probably aren't the people that I want on my team, because they're not able to make that decision for themselves, whether this is a good business opportunity or not. They need to ask a couple of doctors and a couple of friends. And I'm just like, you know what, I'm just going to be banging my head against the wall with this guy as long as he's involved in the business, because he's not able to make a decision on his own.
I've heard that very thing from a person, and it just kind of raised up a question mark in the back of my mind. Is this really the right person?
Right. Definitely raises a red flag.
Well,
yeah.
On that, I just mentioned that in a business that I had before, I remember I had about 80% of my business with one group of people. And that was a bad idea, because when something happened there, that affected 80% of my business. So the advantage that we have in our company, in our groups, in our own business here in Pharmanex Newskin, is that we have a team that if one fails, we have a backup, and we have people that we can help with. So we don't have even if you've got a really great star and that star fades, underneath that star, we've got a whole team of people. We've got a group, we've got a company, we've got a solid tree with great roots in it. So this teamwork for me becomes very, very essential to our success.
So I have a real quick question for Dan, and it's probably about a tactic Lawrence probably uses. And it is, when you are in that initial conversation with somebody, a rep, is it inappropriate or is it perfectly appropriate to ask them, hey, are you a hunter or are you a placeholder in your current position? Or do you think that's too obtuse?
No, I don't think it's too obtuse. I'm just not sure that you're going to get a honest answer.
Yeah, well,
Because
that's
I've seen
nice.
placeholders, boast to people about how awesome of a salesperson they are, because and how successful they are, and they really haven't done anything in the business.
Is there any other questioning you would recommend, Dan, that essentially gets you to the same, answer for yourself, but where it really, if I ask these questions, this will tell me if they're one or the other?
I would just ask them a little bit about their background. What did you do? What was your role? And if they say my role was to be in the operating room with physicians, instructing them on how to use. Okay, well, were you the person that obtained that business? Are you on a team? Who's the lead team member? Are you the lead team member? Just having a simple conversation.
Okay.
It's not really that invasive, but it's it's some questions that you would ask anybody on an interview, right?
Yeah, but no, it's just that I've never been in the medical device world, so I don't know. I
You
need
don't know
just
the
a little bit.
questions to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's helpful.
Just asking some probing questions. You're going to hear them stutter around and not be so sure of themselves and how they're answering the question. And I think a lot of those, there's a lot of cues that can tip you off to whether or not they're a hunter or they're a gatherer.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, I want to say something. First of all, I want to congratulate you on becoming Emerald. Great job. Really good job.
Thanks. Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks too. In regard to the question though, just now, you know what? A lot of, almost all the time now, when I'm speaking with someone, medical device or sales or wherever background they come from, I tell them up front, right on the first call, I said, you're not going to get rich overnight with this. We're looking for self-starters. If you're that person that doesn't need someone to tell you to be at work at 9 o'clock and you can be consistent and self-starting, then you'll have success with this. If not, then there won't be any success, because no one's telling you when to get to work, when to leave work. You set your own hours, but you have to set your own hours, and you have to have a plan and move forward and be consistent every week. And I tell that to everyone. In regards to the call today, excellent call, guys. And it made me reflect on some of the things. I've become successful in this business. It took me time. I don't know if it was ego or what, but it took me a while. But I can tell you, my success has been because I participate in these calls and I make myself available to learn. Even though I'm successful, it doesn't mean I can't learn more. And that's why I'm on these calls every week. I mean, you put me in a room with Scott Bennett, Steve Moore, Lawrence, and I guarantee you, after 20 minutes, I've learned something. And I learned from the members of my team as well. As Jim said, he's not a medical device salesman. He never has been. I never was. I wasn't even involved in sales. And if I get a good candidate on the phone, I'll bring Dan in sometimes, who's been in the business much less time than I have, from his perspective. And, the real growth in this business, the real money in this business comes from building a team. And if I see Dan and this person gel, you know what? I'm going to put him on Dan's team. If they develop a relationship in a few minutes, that's where this guy's going. But Dan doesn't expect that by any means. It's all about the team. That's what makes us successful, and our abilities to learn about our new team members, their strengths, and help them develop other strengths. And it just creates a respect across the board. So great call today, guys. Very good.
Thank you.
That was great advice, Mike.
I see Steve has got his hand
Steve
up.
has his hand raised.
Yeah.
Guys, good morning and great call. I'm just headed back down to Florida now from Maryland now, but I just wanted to comment on a few things, because a lot of times we're looking for who's going to be that next leader and who we're going to invest time in. But let's also not forget that this is a game of sifting and sorting, and that every person that you talk to has a sphere of influence that could be better than them. And if we look at this business, how many leaders do we really need to recruit?
6.
It's 3, right? It's really 3. You need 3 leadership teams. The other 3 legs can be doing a 2,000 in volume. So you really solid A-game players that you're going to develop in these different lines, whether you recruit them yourself or whether they come in through somebody else. And so what I learned in the beginning, and kind of when I talk to people, and this kind of gets me grounded, is number one, we're looking for people that have contacts, credibility, and resources, right? And you kind of look at people as we're talking to them. But what people lack in contacts, credibility, and resources, they can always make up for hard work, being coachable, and having burning desire. And some of the people you're going to talk to are going to be that leader, that A+ person that you really want to invest time with. But the majority of the people you're going to come in contact with are not going to be. They're going to be your B players, your C players, your D players. And what you want to do with those people is you may identify that, hey, this isn't going to be my next superstar or my next hunter, but this person knows a hunter. And let's find out who they know, and let's sift and sort and upgrade. And, you know, I got recruited by somebody that, well, a couple of you guys know my sponsor. You know, I think Lawrence knows him. I don't think anybody else on this call knows him. You know, if I look at Lawrence, the person that introduced us to Lawrence quit, right? But what we did is Lawrence was underneath there. So it's a lot of times these leaders are not going to present themselves to you directly. They're going to be underneath the surface, much like mining for gold. The gold isn't sitting up at the top. You've got to dig. You know, we went panning for gold the other day, and you know, it's an old gold mine, and they found a gold nugget, and they had to dig these tunnels to go ahead and find the vein. And now, if you go ahead and grab a shovel of soil, which we bought for $3, and we spent 20 minutes panning through it, you know, the three of us each got a shovel of soil, and we got one little fleck of gold out of all that. There's still gold there, but there's not much there anymore. And so what we're doing is we're sifting and sorting to find those gold nuggets. And when we start getting to the point where all we're getting left is gold flakes, you know, then it's time to go ahead and move on to somewhere else. But a lot of times those nuggets are not sitting at the top, you know, and they're not the first people we talk to. They're down below, and they require work through sifting and sorting.
So what you're talking about is methodology, and we're talking about patience, and we're talking about strategy. And these are all subjects that we're going to be covering in the next few weeks. So the methodology, which you mentioned, it's perfectly obvious, absolutely necessary, and the patience and the strategy. So these are all parts of the mindset that we are trying to cover. So thanks, Steve, for that. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Dan. And thanks, everybody, for being on the call. It's now 10:17. I don't want to go on this thing too long because I'll keep everybody. Thanks for being on the call, everybody. Thanks for your input.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, guys.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Wonderful call.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.